About this time last year, the Liberal government announced, during the start of the COVID health crisis, when Parliament was shuttered, that by using its vast regulatory powers, it was banning the use, sale, and importation of more than 1,500 makes and models of legally purchased firearms. This was done without Parliament's authority, it was done without a vote, or even a debate amongst MPs. It was, in my opinion, undemocratic and, in the eyes of many, an illegitimate order. Yet, law-abiding firearm owners follow it, as they must and they always do. But many felt their democratic rights had been stripped away. The Liberals turned hundreds, maybe thousands of my constituents and many tens of thousands of law-abiding, responsible firearm owners across Canada into criminals overnight with the signing of this regulatory order. Today, we debate C-21, which builds on the government's regulatory order and will continue to target and harass Canadian hunters, farmers, and recreational firearms users. What Bill C-21 won't do is improve public safety. Worse, the federal government is using Bill C-21 to resurrect the failed Liberal long gun registry. Now, the Minister of Public Safety will deny it. He'll get angry too, along with many Liberal MPs.
Can you see me?
I do see.
I do want to remind members to put their microphones off, please. It is very disturbing to those who are trying to do their speeches in the House. The Honourable Member for New Brunswick Southwest.
As I was saying, the Minister of Public Safety will deny it. He'll get angry too, along with many Liberal MPs. They will do that instead of replying to the substance of their policy, their own legislation. But listen to the Minister's response this week when answering my Conservative colleague from Red Deer Lacombe during question period. The Minister said, and I quote, "There is no gun registry in the country. It is one of the reasons in the legislation we have brought forward that we will require people who are in possession of these now prohibited weapons to register them properly so we can have a precise calculation of where these guns are," end quote. By the Minister's own description of the legislation, Liberals intend to resurrect a long gun registry. But that's not all. The bill misses its mark elsewhere and will waste resources in other ways too. C-21 hopes to set up a voluntary purchase program, what Liberals call a buyback, of the firearms the government made illegal last year. But what is Ottawa proposing to purchase? It is lawfully obtained firearms, as well as heirlooms and tools. Many are worth thousands of dollars because of their rarity, age, and caliber. The Minister of Public Safety recently said that the government does not know how many firearms will fall under its confiscation program. Yet he also claims elsewhere in the range of 200,000 firearms at an average cost of $1,300 per firearm will be covered. So at the low end of estimates, this will cost taxpayers somewhere in the range of $250 million. But other experts say the Liberals' voluntary confiscation program could cost the Treasury billions of dollars. As many of you know, under this Liberal government, our country's national debt surpasses the debt from every other government before it since Confederation. To Liberals, a few more $1 billion wasted isn't something to worry about. That's because they believe the budget will balance itself. For some reason, the Liberals believe that creating more red tape for law-abiding firearm owners and confiscating their property will somehow stop gang and gun violence in Toronto. They are so confident this is a proven solution that they have even introduced another terribly flawed piece of legislation, Bill C-22, that doles out softer sentences for criminals who commit offenses with a firearm. The Liberals are soft on crime. They are more concerned about standing up for the rights of so-called criminals. Pardon me. They are more concerned about standing up for the so-called rights of criminals than defending our communities. We on this side of the House believe that victims of crime should have the first claim on our compassion. We also believe laws should achieve results, which C-21 won't do. Indeed, C-22 will even make communities less safe. Unlike the Liberals, Conservatives know our justice system must put more emphasis on responding to victims than catering to criminals. The crime the Liberals hope to present are committed by criminals who will never follow the laws and regulations of legal firearm ownership in Canada. Despite the Liberal Order in Council firearm ban last May, there were 462 Toronto shootings in 2020, an increase over 2018. After the Liberals brought in their firearms ban last year, the precursor to C-21, the rate of shootings in Toronto did not go down, but up. Why? Because law-abiding gun owners are not the source of gun crime in Toronto. Madam Speaker, as a Conservative MP in 2012, I was proud to vote to abolish the wasteful and ineffective long gun registry. It cost taxpayers almost $2 billion, and yet it didn't protect the public from gun crime. Instead, it needlessly targeted law-abiding Canadians and tied up police resources. Conservatives went further than simply abolishing it. We also enacted tougher pieces of legislation on the illegal use of firearms, something I know we tried to pass in this Parliament as well, but was voted down by opposition parties. As well, Conservatives also made changes when they were in government, but the data collected on firearm owners from the long gun registry was destroyed so that a future federal government could not resurrect it after promising not to do so. You could say that the Conservative government passed measures 10 years ago to stop Liberal tricks. I say tricks because the last election, we saw Liberals across the country, especially in rural ridings, promise that a re-elected Liberal government would not bring back the long gun registry. Yet, the Minister of Public Safety's answer in question period shows otherwise, that C-21 will create a new registry. As a member of Parliament for New Brunswick Southwest, I represent thousands of law-abiding firearm owners. Each was schooled on how to use firearms responsibly, how to care for them, and how to store long guns. Each was approved by the RCMP to purchase, own, and use their firearms legally. These law-abiding citizens already follow some of the world's strictest laws pertaining to firearm ownership. They are moms and fathers, grandparents, sisters, brothers, and in some cases, kids. They are friends, they are neighbors. They pay their taxes and follow the rules. They enjoy spending their leisure time at a range or hunting deer, birds, and moose in the wood. These law-abiding firearm owners strive to follow all the rules and regulations on firearm ownership as outlined by the RCMP. Safety for them is not an afterthought, but the chief objective whenever they use a firearm. I have seen this firsthand as I've gone shooting with them on many occasions. Don't take my word for it. Go to the range yourself and watch for every single person. It's safety first. It's always about safety first. Why? Because they are responsible Canadians. But as well, many of them are legally allowed to possess restricted firearms as well. And under the Firearms Act, the RCMP scans their names through the Canadian Police Information Centre every single day. Madam Speaker, I did not misspeak. Every single day, checks are made. Unfortunately, to the Liberals, these men and women are threats. They are practically criminals in their eyes. The act of them legally purchasing a firearm is seen as dangerous. The Minister of Public Safety has taken it upon himself to overreach into provincial authority and attempt to confiscate legally purchased property at taxpayer expense. C-21 as well as C-22 are flawed bills that are poorly thought out and make our communities unsafe. After the tragic killings in Nova Scotia last year, the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety shared a briefing with parliamentarians. Those who joined the government's technical call on the Liberal Order in Council firearm ban last year will recall the exchange. When asked, we were told, quote, when asked, quote, would anything that was announced today change what occurred in Nova Scotia and how we accessed those illegal firearms, end quote? The Public Safety Parliamentary Secretary replied, and I quote, et je cite, c'est pas l'objectif.
That's not the objective.
End quote, we were told. So other than using a national tragedy to vilify and harass law-abiding firearm owners, what will C-21 achieve? Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions et commentaires? Questions and comments?
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to thank my honourable colleague for his speech here today. What I take issue with in his remarks here in the House is a couple things. One, at the onset of his speech, he talked about this being an undemocratic exercise of the government's discretion. And then he just talked about using a national tragedy as a rationale for bringing this policy forward. And I have no problem debating the member on the merits of the bill. But what I take issue with is he knows that an order in council is the legitimate way to be able to ban prohibit weapons under the criminal code. And he also knows that this was in his platform, in our platform as the Liberal Party. So will he at least admit that this was the legitimate way for a government to go about prohibiting firearms, and also that this was in our platform and it was not as a result of the tragedy that happened in Nova Scotia?
The honourable member for New Brunswick Southwest.
Well, thank you for the question. Just because something is technically legal does not mean it should be acted upon. It was part of the Liberal platform, but the forum to bring forward these changes is Parliament. And yet the Prime Minister brought these forward at a time of the health crisis when Parliament was closed and there was no room for debate. So it was a technically legal maneuver, but it wasn't the right way to go about this, because it shut out MPs who represent voters across the country and at that time had no say.
Questions et commentaires? Questions and comments? The honourable member for Shefford. Thank you very much. I want to thank my colleague for his speech. And straight off, I would say that I am part of a family of hunters and fishers. So I think that people who use their guns responsibly, like hunters and fishers, we don't want to attack them. And I don't think that's what the bill does. My colleague who spoke earlier said something similar in her speech. Now, there are two aspects here. First of all, there's the aspect of illegal possession and use of firearms by illegal groups. And we can reduce their use while also fighting the proliferation of legal weapons. Now, when it comes to organized crime or criminal groups, can we talk a little bit about better controlling the borders, which is something that many groups have been calling for to improve safety? Member for New Brunswick Southwest.
Et merci beaucoup, my colleague.
Thank you very much, my colleague. Well, listen, C-21 affects thousands of hunters and fishers and people who live in rural areas because it makes them criminals. So it does affect them. So it's a bad piece of legislation for that reason. Now, in terms of the border, and illegal firearms, yes, we should have stronger penalties. But listen, the Conservatives have tried to pass bills like that, and we were blocked by the government and other members of the opposition. Now we have Bill C-22, which is going to reduce penalties for those illegal aspects. Thank you. Questions and comments? Member for Fundy Royal.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank my honourable colleague from New Brunswick Southwest for his great speech. He touched on a theme, and I want to ask him a question on it. The focus of this legislation, I know for my rural constituents, seems to be targeting exactly the wrong people. And I note that the government brought in, right after this bill, brought in Bill C-22 that lessens the sentencing for robbery with a firearm, extortion with a firearm, weapons trafficking, using a firearm in the commission of offense, and possession of a weapon obtained by commission of offense. So these are offenses committed by actual criminals that they're lowering the sentences for, while Bill C-21 seems to be targeting the wrong people entirely, which is non-criminals. Can the honourable member please comment on that?
A very brief answer from the member for New Brunswick Southwest, please.
Well, thank you. That's my point. These two bills have to be looked at in conjunction. On one hand, C-21 targets law-abiding Canadians by turning them to criminals, penalizing them. At the same time, C-22 lessens the criminal sanctions on the illegal use of firearms. It makes no sense, and a Conservative government would do the exact opposite. Thank you.